Hi, and welcome to this CIM MES mentor interview. It's my pleasure today to have with me Terence Ortslan, known as Terry Ortslan, and I'd like to welcome you. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Jackie. How are you? Great to have me. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us today. And so we're very excited to learn a bit more about you. We've got followers who are students, some young professionals and older professionals too, who are, curious about others in the industry. Certainly the youngsters like to hear about some of the career paths that might be in front of them as they look outwards. So I'd love to start today asking you a bit about your educational background.
Well, that's great to talk about the past and the future in a session like this, and great to be able to pass some of the views and interpretations and experiences to the next generation. Education essentially was through McGill. McGill was my favorite university during high school, and we're happy to have it, acceptance to go there. And in the old days, engineering used to be 5 years, not 3 years or 4 years. And the first 2 years of general engineering has been great in terms of seeing what other opportunities have been. And then selection process started after the second year, and that's been very difficult to do. I remember these presentations by different professors, electrical, mechanical, chemical, civil, and so on. And I remember this prof with the white coat, Professor White, never forgot him. Professor White from Australia came with a world map and nothing else. The world map and put it up there. He said, I was born here. My parents worked there. I lived there. I worked there. Now I'm at McGill, and they're like, wow, what a great trip. So I think that was the record, actually, year for McGill for attendance for sign up for the students. And I think we had 20 or 28 or 30 people, which is for a typical class used to be in the past less than 10. So everybody was overwhelmed. He sold it. So
So
I'm
he
still
was
following this
selling
path.
mining engineering. Was that what everyone signed up for that year?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very
Mm-hmm.
exciting, actually. He was a
Wonderful.
great chairman and great department at the time.
Good, good. Okay, so that tells us that you've got a technical background, and we know that you spent a lot of time working in the financial industry as well with that technical background. Maybe you could talk a bit about your career path and how you ended up where you are now then.
Yeah, actually, our engineering time, we had great prof in terms of geophysics. Our degree used to be mining engineering and applied geophysics, and
Mm-hmm.
today I'm completely out of date in geophysics. It's nothing got to do with the original geophysics back in late 60s, early 70s. And then the MBA came along in terms of opportunity to be able to do an MBA at McGill, and in the meantime, there were some job opportunities here and there. And after working here and there for about, let's say, in IOC, Iron Ore Company of Canada, INCO in New Brunswick, and I think MBA was completed or almost done. And I looked back, I said most of the jobs that I've done, but they're very interesting actually at Iron Ore Company of Canada, learning uh, geostatistics, new ore bodies to be measured. Brunswick was very maintenance. INCO was actually a brand new mine that started up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, those days were 2,000 tons per day. It was like, wow, 2,000 tons per day underground operation. That was a big startup, and learned a lot over there too. But recession came along in mid 70s. Things were very tough in the industry, and also was teaching at McGill in the MBA school, and then also the engineering school on a part-time basis, an adjunct prof. And financial industry was actually interesting to me, that all these companies, where do they get their money from to be in the business?
Mm-hmm.
So I got to know one of my profs actually was Dr. Buck, Tony Buck, banker and analyst. I actually approached him, and he put me in touch with other people. Next thing I know, I'm in the business.
Okay.
And the business started in a way that there were only a few companies at the time. We used to have no reports. You used to get a mail in the mail, see every 6 months a little brochure statement of an income statement with very few numbers. Once you had the balance sheet, and there was the analysis. You had to create your own models and opinions. Yeah,
So were you doing site visits in those days?
very difficult to get to the site. Everything was secretive.
Wow.
You had to have a reason to go to the site.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually, I mean, I worked at Inco and all those places, but going to a gold mine was like, wow. I remember going to Campbell Red Lake in late 70s. It took a while to get to
High
that
grade gold.
Red Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they showed like there's a small stop here that we always with the small machines, almost like a mechano set, and then we get once a month we get the HST grades accordingly. But the industry has changed a lot,
Yes.
and it was a domestic industry. And what happened was the internationalism and multinational industry came along in the sense of increasing the size of the industry as well as the opportunities.
Wonderful. So yeah, and an increase in transparency too, clearly, because the reporting requirements so much stronger now than they were then. And of course, you would have lived through the age of news coming in, very little news, as you mentioned, and then faxes. And so sometimes it would be days after, whereas now everything's real time.
Yeah,
You get a news release, you're on it, it's electronic, everything is so different. So much information, in fact,
yeah.
to sift through.
We've gone from mail to faxes to then we started having not conference calls but annual meetings. To attend annual meeting, you really had to be invited, for instance. You just
Okay,
couldn't walk in
formal
there too.
invites. Yeah,
And you couldn't ask any questions to anybody. Meeting a management was like very difficult. They wouldn't meet you unless some occasion happened. You could have called them, you had to have a friend to talk to somebody else. And the other thing was that our clients, the shareholders, wouldn't see the management very often as well. So
right,
analysts were the key people in
right.
between, try to
Connectors.
mitigate all
Hmm.
the knowledge and transfer the opportunities or issues,
Hmm.
whatever it was.
And even then,
Today,
it wasn't that even, I would say, between one analyst and the other. It really came down to those relationships and who knew the management well might get a bit more information than you
correct,
did. That's
absolutely,
correct. Yeah,
absolutely,
that was how it was when I
absolutely,
started off
absolutely.
in the
Yeah,
business too. And
yeah,
then that
yeah,
changed as well.
yeah, yeah. Today, like you have conference calls, you have
Hmm. Access.
management
Yeah,
meetings, you have
yeah,
symposiums. I mean, everybody wants to market themselves, and
that
everybody
too.
information is plenty and
Hmm.
very fast flowing.
Yes, absolutely. So very different world, and sometimes managing that information is another challenge. But it's good to have the information. At least we're better able to make decisions when we've got timely and accurate information. So very interesting. So you worked then as an analyst for
I,
a while. Could you
yeah,
tell us a bit?
I worked in the research department of some very good investment dealers. John Stewart was one that I really
Hmm.
enjoyed. Then it was along the line with HSBC, Barclays. There was Merrill Lynch. There was and what happened at the end was BRIEX happened sometime in along the line, and
Hmm.
in that BRIEX timing, but we had a position whereby our opinion was this was not worth what it was in terms of share price.
Hmm.
So and we couldn't go and see it. And then all these things happened about fires, and I remember the Guzman at the PDAC showing his wares. It was like it was like kind of a theater. It was like very promotional.
Hmm.
In any case, we never participated in that, and we actually discourage our clients not to go into it in terms of serious investments. And the BRIEX happened. I had a choice to make. I think I got bought and sold in the brokerage sector so many times. We had to go and said, okay, let's have a company on their own. And the clients actually supported it to have independent research. And I think this is the industry changed with
Right.
43 101s,
Hmm.
with more scrutiny and as well as shareholder rights and things like that.
Yes, yes, and we have seen a couple of the independent analysts come out who are not tied to brokerage houses. Yes, who may, as you say, have some conflicts, or at least they have to declare the potential conflicts. So that's a change as well. So it's a very interesting time to have lived through BRIEX, and we had Brian Coates speak as one of our discussion group presenters recently, just to hear what it was like from the inside. So you were on the other side of that as an analyst, and going counter to some others in the business who, of course, were very supportive of the stock. So. What else have you done then through your career? I know that you're not working as with a brokerage firm now. You're doing your independent work. You're a resource strategist, and you're still teaching at McGill part time.
Well, the just the BRIEX time actually reminds me that during the period of BRIEX flop, there was
Hmm.
about three, four, five of them, by the way. BRIEX is one that everybody remembers, but there's another half a dozen that happened.
Hmm.
Some of them are actually first degree and some accidental. But I think there was quite a cooling off period against the mining sector. So it was an
Hmm.
opportunity to come back. But the question was, is there more? Industry became more standardized. I think industry became more professional in terms of getting the message across. Governance became an important part.
Absolutely. Yes.
And we as mining analysts, in fact, I was sharing with somebody else the presentation to the OSC for 43101s and also Industry Standards Task Force, which became the basis for industry norms. But internationalism, which happened a lot in 60s, died away 70s and 80s, it came back again. Then multinationalism started. So the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
was now, as you were asking earlier, have the trips, have the first-hand knowledge of the
Mm-hmm.
properties, understand the management, understand the operators, understand the technology they had. And also a lot of people from outside of business came along into the business. Example was Alan Bond, famous Australian, let's say, beer magnate and the communications. He got into gold business, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
remember, the St. Joe Minerals got taken over. Everybody was wondering who bought St. Joe Minerals at such an exorbitant price. It was Alan Bond, and actually became our client
Right.
at the broker that I was working at. And in essence, what happened is that we gone from that open uh, red carpets, open borders. In other words, geology continues beyond political borders in terms for the investments in the industry. But now, actually, we became to a very bunch of small islands around the world. Mining industry is under scrutiny, under
Mm-hmm.
pressure. There are
Mm-hmm.
a lot of demands on it. And I'll look at the list today. A number of projects have to be financed for the next 8 or 10 years with the electric vehicles and all these issues, critical paths.
Right.
It's hundreds of billions of dollars. And I don't see that how that's going to happen. Our biggest
Mm-hmm.
issue right now going forward is the capital. I think geologists delivered in terms of discovering
Right.
mines and opportunities, but the problem right now is capital and
Funding.
agreements with the host countries to be able for us to exist and to continue.
Yeah, that's been again an area of change over time too. So many changes to the to taxation, royalties, the operating environment. Many different things can affect the viability of a mining project and the attractiveness of a country for investment. So, yeah, that challenge for funding, you see that lasting for a while then.
Well, the industry is very capital intensive. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to undermine labor. Our labor is not a big chunk of our component of cost. However, we pay our labor very well. One of the best paid labor in the country forever has been in the mining
Mm-hmm.
sector. I think I remember forever and ever when Inco used to make their annual or semi-annual, I'm sorry, every 3 years negotiations with the steel workers that you set the base for the auto
Right,
workers or the
right.
post office or something like that. The thing is that
Mm-hmm.
capital, actually today you look at capital at this reasonable interest rates, there's no money flowing in the mining sector. It's
Mm-hmm.
very, very difficult to get the money. Our
Difficult.
exploration spending is down 50% globally
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the dollars of those days. So in essence, we're
Right.
not spending enough, and there's a capital issue for the
Yeah,
projects.
so that has implications for future supply of metals. Yes, there are some projects that have been found and then need some funding, but for future supply, we do need to keep the pipeline working. So funding is important at all stages to make sure that so many things are going to need the input of metals and minerals content. So important that people know this, that it's a well-paid industry as well, so that if they're looking at potential careers here, it's something to take in mind. Sometimes you end up at a remote location. You're not necessarily in a town. You're where the mines are, the projects are. Some will be in the cities, of course, but it's good to get to know what happens on the ground. And the way to do that is to spend time at the operations or on site, whether
You're
that's
absolutely, you're
exploration.
absolutely right. You're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. I mean, you know very well yourself. You've been through this sector for many years. Our head grades today is a fraction of what they used to be in
Mm-hmm.
gold or in copper, for instance. So we became very good technologically and
Mm-hmm.
volume-wise to be able to do this. But how much low can you get? Some of the cutoff rates that I see in mining sector is like you wouldn't even consider that as a part of your geostats many years ago. So it's a quite successful industry, no question about it. But the problem essentially is that we have now the ESG as a topic, but industry always did ESG,
Mm-hmm.
but not formally, but always did ESG. The thing is that I think the biggest challenge right now is that the governments that actually allowed the mining industry to be welcomed and to operate, they have actually failed for the tax revenues and their responsibility to the communities that the mining industry operates within. So shareholders became stakeholders. Well, shareholders didn't get much of a result out of this because stakeholders had to get more instead of the government. Governments failed in many sectors. Mining
Mm-hmm.
industry took that responsibility themselves. So now we're dealing with the pie, which is very
Mhm.
shrunk
Right.
and very difficult to divide for the shareholders. So the question is, what the shareholders will get out of this?
Mhm.
And this is the issue that mining industry has gone through the last 12, 14 years, and it's going to continue for a while.
Yes, yes, it is, and ensuring adequate returns for shareholders while making sure that other stakeholders that they're responsible to those other stakeholders as well in terms of meeting some of their needs and wants. So lots for the mining industry. It does create challenges. There are opportunities as well through all of this. But as you say, ESG has been a part of what the industry has been doing. We required social license, and there are many activities that were undertaken to ensure that, sometimes well, sometimes not so well. So there's lessons to be learned along the way. I guess as we look now at other parts of what you're doing, Terry, maybe tell us a bit about some of your other interests and hobbies so that people know that when you're working in this industry, there's still some time for things beyond work.
Yeah, as a soccer player, and I still play. So every time we went somewhere, we always found an opportunity whereby to go to a game or pick up some jerseys and meet the soccer
Right.
players or whatever. There's numerous stories floating around in business on my trips. We went to many games and this and that. The other thing is that when some of the mining trips are National Geographic. Literally, people pay a lot of money,
Mm,
and we go
mm,
and sleep in the jungle and see the animals. But at the end of the day, our purpose essentially is get the right information, do our due
right.
diligence, and make sure we make the right decision and continue, because it's not a one shot. You don't go for a trip for 10 years and say, I know everything. It can't, it has to be
Yes,
continued.
it's
I think one
evolving.
point in time, exactly, I think we were like 6 months a year, we were on the road a lot of times and seeing this and seeing
Mm,
that and meeting all those people. Our industry is not only maintenance, which we do well and proceed on that basis, but also the frontiers and the pioneering spirit, geologists, mining engineers, metallurgists, discovering, opening new areas and knowledge and meeting new people. And I think one of the best experiences I had was visiting China. I tried to go to China in early 80s. It took a while to get there. When Deng Xiaoping got elected or appointed to lead the country, the window opened up through McGill and through other corporate sources for me to go and have a first-hand view on China. And I had a position in the university to give courses, a short symposium basis on feasibility studies, case studies, and things like that. I jotted a bunch of things together. I knew that their approach would be different. And the point of the matter was try to make a mutual understanding that we have knowledge and then we need us and we can correspond in some way that we can develop our interests together. And before I left, obviously, there's enough stats around to look at it, Chinese consumption and production. And you see that there were like a couple of percentage points of the world production, a few percentage points of the world consumption. So after going there and making contact and seeing first-hand basis some operations, actually, they were very kind and always asked the question at the time, what's your purpose of visiting us? And you always say, establish long-term friendships. And that actually, those friendships lasted for a long time. So that trip of 1983, 84 became an annual um, destination. And in fact, sometimes more than a few times a year. In fact, we had one trip with industry leaders of at the time that wanted to never been to China at the time was Pierre Lassonde, Ian Telfer, Bob Bishop, and J.C. Potvin, and myself went to China, and that was a trip of late 80s, and that itself has been talked about without experiences. But the thing was that you could see China coming along, and those relationships lasted a long time. I've been to China first time ever in my career, the last 2 3 years. And before used to be always going through China, Mongolia, come back and see what's happening in China. But the point of the matter is that China today consumes half the world's metals, and they also produce a lot of the metals. And at the first trip that I was there, I went to Xinjiang, as a matter of fact, and they gave me a tour of the rare earth facilities. I didn't know much about rare earth at the time, but nevertheless, it was fascinating to see the plant. And in fact, even the mine itself, it took me to, but I couldn't correlate to anything that I knew at the time how to define this thing. But Chinese relationships lasted a long time, and People change obviously over a period of time, but the thing is that what China made to the world, it may happen for India, it may happen to Russia, it may happen to Indonesia, and this thing just rolls on. I think this frontier pioneering spirit in our industry is inherent. And I think that was a great experience to have. And obviously, we've been right that China become a very important part of the metals equation, supply and demand wise. And also today, I think futuristic wise, we ask people questions like, who's the biggest producer of gold in the world? Most people immediately talk about African countries, South Africa, whatever. It's incorrect. Australia, not even Australia is, but it's China. And most people, you ask the question, give me the top 5 mines in China, the names, and most people will struggle for that. So China has been not welcoming in terms of who wants to come and operate there or produce, but consumption-wise, they buy all the metals, and their importance is going to continue for a long time. We're in an adverse position today against and with China on basic metals and trade and so on, but that itself going to bring up a lot of new opportunities that I see as both parties, us being able to produce in China, security of supply orientation that they have, and their financial system is very different than ours. We talk about IRRs and we talk about MPVs and we talk about the payback periods. They look at mines as a cost center, as a value-added center for the economy, which is a completely different philosophy that we have. The other thing is that I think industry gave a lot to me and to the everybody else. And this is a time to give back to the industry. McGill, I'm still involved heavily still, and the PDAC, CIM,
Mm-hmm.
SME. I mean, these are great organizations, well done, well conducted, and well managed. And they are our spokespeople and our transparency to the public.
That's great to hear, Terry. You're certainly very active on the volunteer front then. And it goes both ways, I think, for young people to understand that this is how relationships get built. There's natural networking when you volunteer in a position with one of these organizations, and you're working alongside others from different companies, slightly different parts of the business, and you're getting to know them, and importantly, they're getting to know you and how you work, and that can create opportunities down the road. But it's fun to give back as well, but certainly some benefits on the networking side, which can be difficult for youngsters. This is a natural way to network when you volunteer. So I recommend it for anyone who has some time, and if not, try and make some time, because lots of good industry associations that need the help of volunteers doing great work, and it's an opportunity for those who volunteer as well, as much as the institutions that they support. So good that you're giving so much back on so many fronts, Terry. And what would you say, as you now look back on your career, would you consider any particular moments to be, especially significant? Anything that stood out for you?
I think your background, who you are, and what you do comes into play. I think going back to first few years of work versus I see the way the managers, general managers, what they do. In the old days, used to be just worry about the operations and report to their head office. Today, as a manager, general manager, engineer, whatever, you're part of the community. I mean, you have to go to birthdays, you have to go to play hockey,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to attend people who are ill. And I mean, there's a human aspect to our engineering, but and mines don't have too many neighbors. In a mining
Mm-hmm.
town, the mine itself is the governing element. So stakeholder interests are very important to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I always share that with all the students that I have, and also with all the managements that I meet over the years. And the mining industry is so international and multinational that sometimes we see operators coming from Chile or go to Burkina Faso, from there go to Papua New Guinea, and the world's become very small. I mean, I remember many times that when I was in Mongolia, I used to wake up in the morning, have breakfast in Mongolia, lunch in China, and dinner in Toronto. I mean, that happens because you have the one, you have the advantage on you, but most people don't believe you can do that. And I
Yes.
remember in Guyana, we used to have Guyana deep jungle, and we used to have breakfast there, and you're home for dinner. And most people say, like, how do you do that? So this is small. World is small, and it's easy because today with the communications, you don't, you could be everywhere and
That's
still
true.
operate. Amazing,
Yes.
amazing
Yes. Yes.
opportunity. Great,
It,
great industry, no question.
Absolutely fascinating. And I think it's only by hearing these stories that some people really understand. And, if we could throw up some pictures of the different things we've seen and the places we've been, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It's a wonderful opportunity for travel and to get to know other countries. And when you're out in a remote area, to take a walk and look around and don't just sit in a hotel or in the site. If you do have a chance, and it's not always possible, but if you have like an evening off or an extra day there, to go and see what's happening locally and get a real feel for the country and the people. And as you say, over time, projects change, management changes, and so you've got to stay on top of these things by keeping in touch and getting out to site where possible in a reasonable way. So that's wonderful. I guess along the way too, would you say that you saw any challenges or anything you'd want to highlight for, say, a younger person newer to the industry or getting into the industry, that you would say it's important for them to know?
Well, the assumption that when you finish school, that you know enough and your knowledge is sufficient to be able to practice for many years, it's a false expectation. Okay.
Mm.
So the observing and learning just goes on all the way, all the time. And luckily, our industry is so incestuous. In other words, previous days, if you worked in Sudbury like I did, Inco and Falconbridge wouldn't talk to each other. Okay, like this is it was a big, great wall of China almost, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everybody had a
Competitors,
culture,
right?
exactly. But today, it's amazing. You go to PDAC, CIM, anytime, anywhere else in the occasion. Like we have CIM chapters, many cities. People get together, exchange information. It's fantastic opportunity for everybody to be part of it. And I'm so enriched by saying that when I see manufacturing companies, metallurgical companies, all working with the engineers operating the mines and get the feedback. Previous days, Atlas Copco, you have to buy it or you don't want to buy the property,
Mm-hmm.
the equipment, right? Today, there's so much innovation. There's so much input by all the sectors. I mean, we did our share, are getting the lowest cost possible for the industry. What happened was, I think we are being taken for granted by many leaders around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that all the time when I travel and I get involved in policy issues. Most politicians, most decision makers are politicians. There's nothing wrong with that. But mining is a special sector. It's a long payback. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot of capital to do something going on, and you're not a price taker. We only control your costs.
Mm-hmm.
And best example is that yeah, just very recently we've seen what's happening with the taxation royalties and everything else. Industry needs a payback, reasonable payback, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years at most. We've seen some numbers now floating around twice that. I mean, might as well be the utility business. If you're going to be 20-year payback, you can't carry this business. So I think there has to be education to be done, and I
Yes.
think there are opportunity for that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
our task is that world we're supposed to solve world's problems,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna do it together.
Yeah, very good point there. To be seen as solutions companies, not just those that dig holes
Exactly.
or
Nobody wants to
tunnel
hear about
underground.
problems. Everybody wants to have a solution. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a lot. The perception's so important, and the mining industry is starting to speak up for itself. But as you say, those partnerships are in place. We're working collaboratively with other groups to get the cost low, to improve the technology, and it would be good to see some recognition for that. But part of it is us telling that story, as we say, and making sure that people know what we're doing, and that the goods that they use every day depend so heavily on what we're doing. And certainly this focus on sustainability and low carbon environment, it's heavily dependent on mining. So a lot of education to do there, and just let people know what it is that we're doing and how it affects their lives in a positive way. Doesn't mean the industry has been perfect, but there's certainly lots that's good to talk about. So wonderful. Terry, tell us then now, looking forward, do you see yourself continuing to do more of the same, or do you see any changes in your future?
I think the headline that solving problems will continue. I'm pretty well sure the problem is not because we're doing the wrong thing as an industry. I think we're not getting our message across what's needed to be done. But the other
Mm-hmm.
side has to understand as well that mining is a special sector that needs special requirements. So
Mm-hmm.
in that context, there's a lot of problems to solve. I think I can foresee longevity of anybody taking that task and try to solve it. And we have a lot of projects today that haven't been mined yet. I mean, I can go on in Romania, in South America, and in Asia. There's lots of projects still sitting there because of this transparency, misunderstanding, and not acceptance what the industry needs. Mining industry, as you know, everybody thinks that we're a dangerous sector, okay, in terms of accidents and fatalities and all, and nobody reads the statistics. I mean, our fatality rates, I'm going to use that word instead of safety. Safety, we know how safe mines are. I think COVID showed that, for instance, right? I think our message across is too much incestuous among ourselves, and it has to come across by the leaders as well. Try to tell the message across to the public that we are a need sector, not a want sector.
Yes, very true, very true. Critical, in fact. And so thanks for highlighting that importance. I think that brings us close to the end here. Any final words? If you had a classroom of students in front of you today, what would your parting words be?
Don't get disappointed. I think there will be cycles whereby you're going to have recessions and all, have staying power. And second thing is that always think about reinventing yourself, because things do change. I mean, I look at my geophysics days versus now. I just go some properties and I look at the geophysics. I go like, I can read it, but I don't know how they did it.
Yes.
So, and same with the metallurgy and mining practice. I mean, reinventing yourself and looking at the opportunities within that, you will do very well in the sector. We're going to be around for a long time. It's one of the oldest professions in the world.
Yes, yes.
Our
and
civilization goes with the Stone Age and Bronze Age and so on and so forth. So we're going to be around for a long time.
Very true, very true. And the needs will be there for a long time. So thanks again for highlighting the cyclicality of the industry. Important to know for students and young professionals to stay nimble, be well trained, always be willing to learn something. And that way you'll never get bored. It's an exciting industry. And I think a lot of that's come through your words.
It's the industry of first principles, I think, more than anything else.
Yes. Well, thanks very much for sharing that. Appreciate your time today. And it's been a pleasure having you with us. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Jackie. Great questions. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it. Thank you.